Victoria Sterling's executive elevator lurches to a violent stop, plunging her into complete darkness as the acrid smell of burnt wires fills her lungs. If you've ever felt powerless, hit like and subscribe. The CEO of Sterling Enterprises had stepped into the private elevator moments earlier, her mind focused on the crucial board meeting scheduled in 20 minutes. She carried a briefcase containing documents that would reshape the company's future, a merger proposal worth $2 billion. Now she stood trapped between the 42nd and 43rd floors, her perfectly pressed suit wrinkled against the elevator's cold metal walls. Victoria pressed the emergency button repeatedly. Nothing. She tried her phone. No signal. The elevator's ventilation system had stopped working, and the temperature climbed steadily in the confined space. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she calculated how long her absence would be noticed, how quickly Richard Blackwood would capitalize on her missing the meeting point 3 floors below. Mark Thompson pushed his cleaning cart down the executive wing's marble corridor. The single father had worked the night shift at Sterling Enterprises for 2 years, invisible to most of the corporate elite who rushed past him during daylight hours. He knew every corner of this building, every maintenance panel, every emergency protocol. The elevator alarm pierced the quiet hallway. Mark had heard that sound before, usually a minor glitch that reset itself within minutes. But tonight, the alarm persisted, growing more urgent with each passing second. He abandoned his cart and hurried to the executive elevator bank. The display showed the car stuck between floors. Mark knew the building's emergency procedures better than most security guards. His previous job as a maintenance technician had taught him to read the signs of electrical failure. Using his master key, Mark accessed the emergency panel beside the elevator doors. The control circuits showed clear evidence of sabotage: wires deliberately severed, safety systems bypassed. Someone had wanted this elevator to fail tonight. Mark grabbed the manual override tools from the emergency box. With precise movements, he engaged the manual door release and began prying open the elevator doors. The metal groaned under pressure, slowly revealing the trapped executive inside. Victoria Sterling stood in the dim emergency lighting, her usual composure intact despite the ordeal. She stepped out of the elevator with measured dignity, brushing dust from her jacket. "Thank you," she said curtly, already checking her watch. 18 minutes until the board meeting. She could still salvage this disaster if she moved quickly. Mark nodded, studying the damaged control panel. "Ma'am, you should know, this wasn't an accident. Someone cut these wires deliberately." But Victoria had already disappeared down the corridor, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor. She had no time for conspiracy theories from a janitor. The board meeting would determine whether she remained CEO of Sterling Enterprises, and Richard Blackwood was waiting for any sign of weakness to exploit. Mark stared at the severed wires, troubled by what he'd discovered. In his 2 years at Sterling Enterprises, he'd never seen deliberate sabotage. Someone had wanted Victoria Sterling trapped in that elevator tonight, and they'd nearly succeeded. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom buzzed with whispered conversations the following morning. Richard Blackwood stood at the head of the polished conference table, his silver hair perfectly styled, addressing the assembled board members with calculated concern. "Gentlemen, ladies," Richard began, his voice carrying the weight of manufactured worry. "Last night's incident raises serious questions about Victoria's ability to lead this company. An elevator malfunction that traps our CEO for 30 minutes? It's symptomatic of the chaos that's been plaguing our operations." Board member Patricia Hughes leaned forward. "Richard, surely you're not suggesting Victoria is responsible for mechanical failures?" "I'm suggesting," Richard replied smoothly, "that effective leadership means anticipating problems, not getting trapped by them. This merger proposal she's pushing through, how can we trust her judgment when she can't even navigate her own building safely?" The murmurs around the table grew louder. Richard had planted the seed perfectly. Victoria's absence from the rescheduled morning meeting only reinforced his narrative of incompetence. Meanwhile, Victoria sat in her corner office, studying building maintenance reports from the past month. Every instinct told her the elevator failure was deliberate, but she had no concrete evidence. Accusing Richard of sabotage without proof would make her appear paranoid, desperate to deflect blame for her own failures. She picked up her phone and dialed the head of security. "James, I need the complete maintenance logs for all executive elevators from the past 6 months. Yes, I know it's unusual. Just get them to me today. 40 floors below, Mark Thompson sat in the employee break room, staring at a letter from Mercy General Hospital. The paper trembled in his hands as he read the final insurance denial for his daughter Lily's surgery. Experimental treatment not covered under standard employee health plan. The letter stated in cold, bureaucratic language. Patient must seek alternative funding sources or consider traditional treatment options. Traditional treatment options meant watching his 8-year-old daughter suffer through another year of pain while her condition worsened. The experimental surgery offered a 90% success rate, but the cost, $47,000, might as well have been $47 million. For a janitor, earning minimum wage. Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Lily's babysitter. Lily asking when you'll be home. She drew you another picture for your locker. His chest tightened. Lily always drew pictures when she was scared, when the pain medication wasn't working well enough to let her sleep. The latest drawing showed the two of them holding hands under a rainbow, with the words, "Daddy fixes everything," scrawled in purple crayon. If you're struggling to provide for your family against impossible odds, share this story and let us know. In the comments, Mark folded the denial letter and shoved it into his uniform pocket. He had 3 jobs lined up for weekend interviews: a warehouse position, night security at a hotel, and maintenance work at a smaller office building. None paid enough to cover Lily's surgery, but combined with his sterling enterprises salary, he might save enough in 2 years if Lily could wait 2 years that he returned to his cleaning duties, pushing the cart through the executive wing with mechanical precision. His mind raced through impossible calculations, overtime shifts, selling their car, borrowing against his life insurance policy. Every scenario ended the same way. Not enough money, not enough time. As he cleaned the windows outside the boardroom, fragments of conversation drifted through the heavy doors. Elevator sabotage was carefully planned. Mark stopped pushing his cart, straining to hear more. Someone with building access, someone who understands the electrical systems. Richard Blackwood's voice carried clearly. Security footage shows a maintenance worker near the elevator bank at 11:30 p.m. Could be our saboteur. Mark's blood ran cold. He had been near those elevators at 11:30, fixing the elevator that trapped Victoria Sterling. They were talking about him, that he forced himself to keep moving, to appear busy while his world collapsed around him. If they suspected him of sabotage, he'd lose his job immediately. No job meant no insurance for Lily, no money for rent, no hope of ever affording her surgery. The conversation inside the boardroom continued, but Mark couldn't focus on the words. His daughter's face filled his mind. Lily laughing at breakfast. Lily curled up in pain during her bad days. Lily drawing rainbows because she believed her daddy could fix anything. He couldn't afford to care about corporate conspiracies or executive power struggles. His only concern was earning enough money to save his daughter's life, and that meant keeping his head down and staying invisible. Mark pushed his cart toward the service elevator, deliberately avoiding the executive elevator bank where he'd rescued Victoria Sterling the night before. Whatever games the corporate elite played among themselves, he couldn't get involved. He had too much to lose. In her office, Victoria received the maintenance logs and spread them across her desk. 3 elevator service calls in the past month, all performed by different technicians. The night of her incident, the logs showed routine cleaning by M. Thompson, night maintenance staff. She pulled up the employee directory and found Mark's photo, the same man who had freed her from the elevator. His personnel file showed 2 years of perfect attendance, no disciplinary issues, and a clean background check. Either he was an exceptional actor, or he was exactly what he appeared to be, a hardworking maintenance worker who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Victoria closed the file and stared out at the city skyline. Richard was building momentum in the boardroom, using her elevator incident as evidence of failing leadership. She needed allies, but couldn't risk trusting the wrong people. In corporate warfare, paranoia was often the difference between survival and destruction. The intercom on her desk buzzed. "Miss Sterling, the board is requesting your presence for an emergency session at 3 o'clock. Victoria glanced at her watch, 2:15 p.m. Richard was moving faster than she'd anticipated, forcing a confrontation before she could gather evidence or build support among wavering board members. She straightened her jacket and gathered her merger proposal documents. If Richard wanted to challenge her leadership, she'd remind the board why Sterling Enterprises needed her vision for the future. The elevator incident was a distraction, a manufactured crisis designed to undermine her authority. But as she walked toward the boardroom, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap far more dangerous than any broken elevator. The emergency board meeting lasted 2 hours. Victoria emerged from the boardroom with her merger proposal intact, but barely. 3 board members had openly questioned her leadership, and Richard's influence was spreading like poison through the corporate structure. She returned to her office and locked the door. The maintenance logs lay scattered across her desk, but she needed more than paperwork. Victoria opened her laptop and accessed the building's security database, a privilege reserved for executives with Level 5 clearance. The camera feeds from the night of the incident revealed everything. At 11:17 p.m., a figure in maintenance coveralls approached the executive elevator control panel. The timestamp showed clear footage of someone tampering with the electrical systems, deliberately severing key safety wires. Victoria froze the image and enhanced the resolution. The saboteur's face remained hidden beneath a baseball cap, but she could make out distinctive features: tall, lean build, wearing work gloves. Most importantly, this person moved with practiced familiarity around the electrical systems. She cross-referenced the timestamp with employee badge records. Only 3 people had building access at that time: 2 security guards on patrol and Mark Thompson completing his cleaning rounds. The security guards were both accounted for on different floors. That left Mark as the only possible suspect. Victoria stared at the frozen image, her mind racing. The man who rescued her had also trapped her. It was the perfect crime: create the problem, then appear as the hero who solves it. But why would a janitor risk his job for such an elaborate scheme? Her phone rang. Richard Blackwood's name appeared on the caller ID. "Victoria, we need to talk." "My office now." She found Richard standing behind his mahogany desk, a manila folder positioned prominently in front of him. His smile carried the cold satisfaction of a predator who had cornered his prey. "Sit down," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across. From his desk, Victoria remained standing. "What do you want, Richard?" "I want what's best for Sterling Enterprises. And what's best is new leadership." He opened the manila folder and slid a document across the desk. "Recognize this?" Victoria's blood turned to ice. The document was a copy of her college transcripts that had been altered 15 years ago to hide her plagiarized thesis. She had paid a substantial sum to bury that scandal before joining Sterling Enterprises. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "Does it matter? What matters is that plagiarism would destroy your reputation overnight. The board would demand your immediate resignation, and you'd never work in corporate leadership again." Richard leaned back in his chair, savoring his advantage. "Of course, this information doesn't have to become public. What do you want?" "Your resignation letter on my desk by tomorrow morning. Announce it as a voluntary step down to pursue other opportunities. I'll take over as interim CEO, and this embarrassing document disappears forever." Victoria's hands clenched into fists. "You bastard. You sabotaged that elevator to make me look incompetent, and now you're blackmailing me with ancient history." Richard's smile widened. "Prove it. Prove I had anything to do with your elevator mishap. Prove I didn't acquire this document through perfectly legitimate channels." He stood and walked around the desk, stopping inches from Victoria's face. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Resign gracefully, or watch your career burn to ashes." At that exact moment, 3 floors below, Mark Thompson sat in the Employee Health Services office, facing Mrs. Chun, the benefits coordinator. She had called him down from his cleaning duties for an urgent meeting about Lily's medical coverage. "Mr. Thompson, I've reviewed your daughter's case extensively with our insurance provider," Mrs. Chun said, her voice heavy with regret. "The experimental surgery she needs is simply not covered under our employee health plan." "I'm sorry." Mark stared at the rejection letter in his hands. The third and final appeal, now officially denied. "There has to be something else. A payment plan, a hardship fund, anything. I've explored every option. The surgery costs $47,000, and our policy has strict limits on experimental treatments." Mrs. Chun leaned forward sympathetically. "Have you considered seeking charity care from other hospitals?" I've tried everywhere. They all say the same thing. Too expensive, too experimental, try again next year. Mark's voice cracked. Next year might be too late for Lily. Mrs. Chun consulted her computer screen. Your employment record shows perfect attendance and excellent performance reviews. Perhaps if you spoke directly to Ms. Sterling, she might authorize a special exception, MS. Sterling doesn't know I exist, Mark interrupted. I'm just a janitor who empties her trash and cleans her windows. Why would she care about my daughter? Sometimes compassion comes from unexpected places, Mrs. Chin said quietly. Mark folded the rejection letter and stood to leave. Compassion doesn't pay medical bills. He walked back to the elevator bank, his mind numb with despair. The elevator doors opened, and he found himself face to face with Victoria Sterling. She looked as devastated as he felt, her usual composure replaced by barely controlled panic. They rode up in silence, two people trapped in their separate crises. Victoria stared at the elevator's control panel, thinking about the security footage that implicated Mark in her sabotage. Mark stared at the floor numbers, thinking about Lily's surgery slipping further from his reach. When the elevator stopped at Victoria's floor, she turned to Mark before stepping out. The night you rescued me from this elevator, did you notice anything unusual about the electrical systems? Mark met her eyes, seeing desperation that matched his own. Everything was cut deliberately. Someone wanted you trapped in here. The elevator doors closed between them, leaving Victoria alone with the terrible knowledge that her rescuer might also be her saboteur, and leaving Mark alone with the crushing weight of his daughter's uncertain future. Both stood on opposite sides of the same building, cornered by forces beyond their control, unaware that their fates were about to become inseparably linked. The Sterling Enterprises building stood nearly empty at 11 p.m. Victoria had spent the entire evening in her office, staring at Richard's ultimatum. Her resignation letter sat half-written on her computer screen, cursor blinking mockingly at the end of an incomplete sentence. She couldn't resign. Sterling Enterprises was her life's work, built from the ground up over 15 years of calculated decisions and ruthless determination. But she couldn't fight Richard's blackmail either. The plagiarism scandal would destroy not just her career, but her reputation across the entire industry. Victoria walked to her office window and looked down at the city lights below. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. No allies in the boardroom, no friends she could trust with this secret, no family to turn to for support. She had sacrificed everything for corporate success, and now that success was crumbling around her. The sound of a cleaning cart rolling down the marble corridor broke her from her thoughts. Mark Thompson appeared in her doorway, emptying the wastebasket beside her desk with practiced efficiency. "Working late again, Miss Sterling?" he said quietly. Victoria turned from the window, studying the man she suspected of sabotaging her elevator. His tired eyes held the same desperation she felt, and suddenly her suspicions seemed less important than her isolation. "Mark, isn't it?" she said. Remembering his name from the employee file, he looked surprised that she knew who he was. "Yes, ma'am. Can I ask you something? When you rescued me from that elevator, you said the damage was deliberate. How could you be so certain?" Mark set down his cleaning supplies and approached her desk cautiously. "I worked maintenance for 8 years before taking this job. Cut wires have a different pattern than were failures. Someone knew exactly which systems to disable." Victoria nodded slowly. "Someone with building access and electrical knowledge. Had to be." Mark paused, then added, "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, why are you still here so late? You look like you haven't slept in days." The concern in his voice broke something inside Victoria. She had been surrounded by corporate sharks for so long that genuine human compassion felt foreign and precious. "I'm being blackmailed," she said quietly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Mark's eyes widened. "By who?" "Richard Blackwood. He has evidence of something I did years ago, something that would ruin my career if it became public. He wants me to resign tomorrow morning, or he'll destroy me." Mark stepped closer, his voice urgent. "The same Richard Blackwood who's been spreading rumors about your leadership? The same one." Victoria laughed bitterly. "He sabotaged my elevator to make me look incompetent, and now he's using blackmail to finish the job. I built this company into what it is today, and he's stealing it with lies and threats." Mark was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. When he spoke again, His voice carried new determination. What if I told you there might be a way to prove he was behind the elevator sabotage? Victoria's heart raced. How? The building's security cameras aren't just in the hallways. There are hidden cameras in the maintenance areas, backup systems that most people don't know about. If Richard had an accomplice tamper with that elevator, there might be footage. Check out our other videos for more stories of unlikely alliances that changed everything. Victoria felt hope stir for the first time in hours. Can you access those cameras? I have master keys to every part of this building, including the security office. But I need to know, why are you trusting me with this? For all you know, I could be working with Richard. Victoria studied Mark's face, seeing exhaustion and worry etched in the lines around his eyes. Because you rescued me from that elevator when you could have left me trapped. Because you're working 3 jobs to pay for your daughter's medical treatment, and desperate people don't usually have the luxury of elaborate conspiracies. Mark looked startled. How do you know about Lily's surgery? I know more about my employees than you might think. The insurance denials, the financial hardship. I've seen the requests cross my desk. Victoria's voice softened. I also know that $47,000 is impossible to raise on a janitor's salary. Mark's shoulders sagged. The surgery is her only chance at a normal life. Without it, she'll spend her childhood in and out of hospitals. I'd do anything to get her that operation. Victoria nodded slowly. What if I told you that helping me prove Richard's sabotage could solve both our problems? I don't understand. If we can expose Richard's conspiracy, I keep my job and he loses his position on the board. And a grateful CEO has the authority to authorize special medical coverage for valued employees. Mark stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. You do that? Cover Lily's surgery. I'd do more than that. I'd promote you to head of facilities management, with a salary that ensures Lily gets the best medical care available. Victoria extended her hand. Partners. Mark shook her hand, his grip firm with newfound purpose. Partners. When do we start? Right now? Show me these hidden security cameras. They left Victoria's office together, an unlikely alliance born from mutual desperation and shared determination. Mark led her through corridors she had never seen, down service stairwells to the building's technical levels. The security office was a maze of monitors and recording equipment. Mark used his master key to access the backup surveillance system, cycling through camera feeds from the night of the elevator incident. There, Victoria pointed at a monitor showing the maintenance level near the elevator shafts. 11:15 p.m., just before the sabotage. The footage revealed a figure in maintenance coveralls approaching the elevator control systems. The person moved with confidence, clearly familiar with the building's layout. When the saboteur turned toward the camera, adjusting a baseball cap, his face became partially visible. Victoria gasped. That's not you. No, Mark said grimly. That's Gary Morrison, one of the day shift maintenance supervisors. He's worked here for 12 years. Long enough to know every system in the building. Victoria leaned closer to the monitor. Can you enhance this image? Mark adjusted the controls, bringing Gary's face into sharper focus. There, clear enough to identify him in court. Victoria felt a surge of vindication mixed with sadness. She had spent her entire career in this building, trusting it as her sanctuary, only to discover that her enemies had been working inside all along. You know what the strangest part is? She said quietly. What? Part of me is almost grateful to Richard for pushing me to this point. I've been trapped in this corporate cage for so long that I forgot what it felt like to fight for something that mattered. She looked at Mark with new respect. You reminded me that there's more to life than quarterly reports and board meetings. There are people like you and Lily who deserve better. Mark saved the security footage to a portable drive. So what's our next move? Victoria smiled for the first time in days. Tomorrow morning, we give Richard Blackwood exactly what he deserves. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom filled with tension as Victoria walked through the doors at exactly 9 a.m. Richard Blackwood sat at the head of the table, her resignation letter positioned expectantly before his chair. The other board members exchanged glances, sensing the gravity of whatever confrontation was about to unfold. Good morning, everyone, Victoria said calmly, taking her usual seat. I have some important information to share before we discuss any personnel changes. Richard's smile faltered slightly. Victoria, I believe we had an understanding about this morning's agenda. We did. But circumstances have changed. Victoria opened her laptop and connected it to the boardroom's projection system. Last week, I was trapped in an elevator for 30 minutes. Some of you questioned whether this incident reflected poorly on my leadership capabilities. She clicked a button, and the hidden security footage filled the large screen. The timestamp showed 11:15 p.m. on the night of the incident. This footage reveals the truth about that elevator malfunction. Victoria continued. The boardroom watched in stunned silence as Gary Morrison's face appeared clearly on screen, tampering with the elevator's electrical systems. Board member Patricia Hughes leaned forward. Is that Gary Morrison from maintenance? It is. And here's the connection you need to understand. Victoria clicked to the next slide, showing Gary's personnel file. Mr. Morrison was hired 12 years ago on the personal recommendation of Richard Blackwood. They served together in the Army Reserve Unit. Richard's face had gone pale. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly suggest that I had any knowledge of this sabotage. Victoria interrupted. Let's see what else the security footage reveals. The next video clip showed Richard meeting with Gary in the parking garage 2 days before the elevator incident. No audio, but their body language suggested an intense, secretive conversation. Circumstantial evidence, Richard said weakly. Victoria smiled coldly. Perhaps. But Gary Morrison decided to cooperate with security this morning rather than face criminal charges alone. He's provided a full confession detailing your instructions to sabotage the elevator and discredit my leadership. The boardroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a setup. You can't prove any connection between. Sit down, Richard. Victoria's voice carried absolute authority. You're finished. Security officers entered the boardroom on cue, flanking Richard's chair. The man who had orchestrated her downfall sat heavily, his face ashen with defeat. The board will vote on your immediate removal, Victoria announced. All in favor. Every hand in the room rose without hesitation. 2 hours later, Victoria stood in the building's Human Resources office, signing the paperwork that would change Mark Thompson's life forever. The promotion to head of facilities management came with a salary of $85,000 annually, full medical coverage, and authorization for Lily's experimental surgery. I don't know how to thank you, Mark said, staring at the employment contract. You already did. You saved my career by trusting me with the truth. Victoria handed him the signed documents. Lily's surgery is scheduled for next week at Mercy General, the best pediatric team in the city. Mark's eyes filled with tears. She's going to have a normal childhood because of you. She's going to have a normal childhood because her father refused to give up on her. I just provided the opportunity. That evening, Victoria found herself on the building's rooftop garden, a space she had never visited despite working in the building for 15 years. The city sprawled below her, lights twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. Mark joined her at the railing, both of them looking out over the metropolis they called home. Strange how different everything looks from up here, Victoria said. Quietly. Distance changes perspective, Mark replied. Problems that seemed impossible from down there look manageable from up here. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. I spent so many years trapped behind my desk, fighting battles that didn't really matter. Board meetings, quarterly reports, market projections. I forgot what it felt like to fight for something real. And I spent so many years invisible, believing that people like you lived in a different world where my problems didn't matter. Mark turned to face her. We were both wrong. Yes, we were. Victoria smiled genuinely for the first time in months. You know, I've been thinking about making some changes around here. This company needs to remember that we're not just pursuing profits. We're supporting families, building communities, creating opportunities for people like you and Lily. Sounds like the kind of CEO this place has needed for a while. Victoria laughed softly. It took getting trapped in an elevator to realize I'd been trapped in something much worse. A life that had no room for the things that actually matter. Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Lily's babysitter. He showed Victoria the photo. Lily at her hospital pre-surgery appointment, giving a thumbs up to the camera with a huge smile. She looks just like you, Victoria said warmly. She's braver than I ever was. Always believed things would work out, even when I couldn't see how. Children have that gift. They see possibilities where adults see obstacles. Victoria placed a gentle hand on Mark's shoulder. Take care of that little girl. And take care of yourself. Sterling Enterprises is lucky to have both of you. As they stood together on the rooftop, watching the city lights twinkle below, both Victoria and Mark felt something they hadn't experienced in years: genuine freedom. Victoria had escaped the corporate prison that had consumed her life, while Mark had broken free from the financial despair that threatened his daughter's future. Sometimes the most powerful alliances form between the most unlikely people, and sometimes getting trapped is exactly what you need to finally find your way to freedom. Join our community, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories of justice, hope, and the courage to fight for what matters most.